gasoline, hot rubber, and the sharp, stinging note of Old Spice. To this day, that specific combination triggers a panic response right behind my ribs. It's the smell of a lie. Oh. A secret I built one broken headlight at a time. I don't know the first thing about cars. I couldn't tell you the difference between a spark plug and a solenoid if my life depended on it. But I know how to break them. Have you ever wanted something so bad you were willing to sabotage your own life just to get closer to it? I wasn't paying for repairs. I was draining my savings account to buy proximity. I was paying to watch him work. I was terrified that one day he'd fix the one thing I actually needed him to leave broken. Before the battery died, my life was a masterpiece of sterile efficiency. Climate-controlled boxes, spreadsheets, data analysis. I lived in a world where everything was clean, abstract, and resolvable with the right formula. No dirt, no grease, no friction. I moved from a pristine apartment to a glass-walled office without ever really touching the ground. I was a ghost in my own existence. Safe, efficient, and completely numb. Then came a rainy Tuesday in November. My sedan, usually as reliable and boring as the rest of my existence, refused to start. It was a small, humiliating failure. I was stranded in the parking lot of a strip mall, rain plastering my hair to my forehead, feeling utterly useless. That's when I found the shop. It wasn't a franchise. It was a cavernous, dimly lit bay on the edge of the industrial district. It smelled of ozone and wet pavement. It was loud. It was dirty. It was real. And that's when I met Davis. He was grounded, heavy with a calm capability that felt like gravity. Navy jumpsuit unzipped to the waist to reveal a white t-shirt that had seen better days. His hands were permanently etched with grime. Oil settled deep into the fingerprints. When he leaned over my engine, I didn't watch the car. I watched the way his forearm muscles shifted as he twisted a wrench. I watched the focus in his eyes, a quiet, unbothered competence I had never possessed. He moved with a deliberate economy. No wasted energy. Just pure tactile interaction with the world. He was everything I wasn't. Rough edges and raw capability. He fixed the battery in 10 minutes. He didn't try to upsell me. He didn't talk down to me. He just wiped his hands on a rag and said, "She'll run fine now. Just cold weather." That should have been it. Transaction complete. But driving away, the silence in my car felt heavier. My sterile safety suddenly felt like a cage. 10 minutes standing in that drafty garage, watching a stranger bring a machine back to life, felt more intimate than any date I'd been on in 3 years. The air between us had felt charged. The quiet humming of the heater vents, usually a comfort, now sounded like isolation. I went home to my white walls and my silence. And I felt like I was suffocating. 3 days later, I did something insane. I opened the hood of my perfectly functioning car. I stared at the labyrinth of wires and hoses. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The engine bay was a foreign country, a mess of metal and plastic I had no business touching. But my hands moved on their own. I found a wire that looked important. It connected to the headlight assembly. I grabbed it. I pulled. The plastic clip snapped with a dry crack that echoed in the underground garage. It was loud. It was violent. But the light flickered and died, just enough to break the connection. Just enough to have a reason to go back. It started with a headlight, but it spiraled fast. Fuses, a heat shields, the sensors. I became an architect of my own inconvenience. It was a ritual of destruction that was both thrilling and pathetic. So, I learned exactly how much force it took to unseat a relay without snapping the plastic housing. I learned exactly how helpless I needed to look when I rolled into the bay. I became a fixture in Davis's shop. I was the guy with the worst luck in the city. The guy with the lemon. The financial reality was ruinous. Hundreds, eventually thousands of dollars on labor for problems I manufactured. I'd look at my bank statement late at night, scrolling through charges from Davis Auto Repair, and I'd feel a wave of nausea, a knot of shame in my gut. But the next morning, I was back under the hood with pliers. No, desperate for another hit. The cost felt like an offering. A necessary sacrifice to enter the temple. The garage became my sanctuary. Sensory overload drowning out the quiet of my apartment. The violent rattle of the impact wrench. The hiss of the hydraulic lift. The hum of fluorescent lights. But mostly, I love the dynamic, so I love being the observer in his world. Standing on the periphery while he solved problems I had created. Watching the sweat gather at his temples. Watching the way his back flexed when he leveraged a breaker bar. Davis was professional, but the dynamic shifted on the third visit. I was hovering near the lift, watching him wrestle with a stubborn caliper. Suddenly, he slid out from under the chassis on his creeper. Wrench in hand. He didn't stand up. He just looked at me. "Hand me that 10mm, he said. Not asking. Just expecting. I froze, then scrambled to the toolbox. Oh, the metal was cold and heavy in my hand. When I pressed it into his palm, his fingers closed over mine for a fraction of a second. His skin was rough, warm, coated in a thin film of oil. The contact sent a shock through me that nearly made me drop the wrench. It wasn't just a touch. It was a connection. A live wire grounding out. "You're in here a lot," he said. His eyes locked onto mine. Dark. Piercing. My heart hammered against my ribs. The lie sat heavy on my tongue. I felt the heat rise in my neck, flushing my skin. Just bad luck, I guess. He held my gaze. The silence stretched thin. He was looking right at me. Not through me. Dissecting the statement with the same precision he used on the engine. Yeah, bad luck. He turned back to the car, leaving me breathless. It was a small moment. A tiny fracture in the professional veneer. But it felt like a cliff edge. The paranoia became a constant low-level hum alongside the thrill. Every time he looked at me with those dark, unreadable eyes, I thought, this is it. He knows. He's a mechanic. He knows the difference between a stress fracture and a tool mark. He knows what a cut wire looks like. But then he would just nod and get to work. And I would stand there, mesmerized, watching his hands fix what I had broken, destroying the only vehicle that could take me away from him, just to ensure I never had to leave. I was caught in a loop of my own making, dismantling my life just to see if he could put it back together. And every time I drove away with a fixed car, I felt a crushing disappointment, because it meant I didn't have a reason to see him tomorrow. So I broke it again, and again, and again, until I wasn't sure what was more broken, the car, or me, but I didn't care. I just needed to be near him. I needed the grease, the noise, and the way he looked at the engine like it was a puzzle he had to solve. I wanted him to look at me like that. Like I was something broken that only he could fix. So I kept coming back. I kept breaking things. I kept paying the price. And I kept waiting for the moment when the bill would finally come due. The moment when the hood would open, and he would see the truth staring back at him. Thursday night. The sky tore open. A massive storm turned the city streets into rivers of oil-slicked asphalt, drowning out the usual noise of traffic. So, by the time I pulled into the bay, the shop was officially closed. The main garage door was halfway down, shutting out the world, and turning the space into a concrete echo chamber. The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof with a relentless, deafening rhythm. It made the silence inside feel pressurized, dangerous. Just the two of us. Sealed in a box of steel and shadows, I'd come in for a loose belt. I'd slackened the tensioner with a socket wrench in my apartment parking lot an hour prior. A simple fix, a quick hit to get me through the weekend. But Davis didn't put the car on the lift this time. He just popped the hood and leaned over the engine block. The shop lights cast long, jagged shadows across his face, carving out the sharp angles of his jaw. "Can't see the tensioner," he muttered. His voice was rougher than usual, scraping against the quiet. He didn't look up. Grabbed the light. He pointed to a heavy-duty LED work light on the bench. I picked it up. The rubber grip was cold against my sweating palm. I moved to stand beside him, and the sudden proximity was a physical shock. He was leaning deep into the engine bay, one leg braced against the bumper for leverage. His t-shirt strained across his back as he reached down into the dark machinery, the cotton damp with sweat. "Shine it right there," he said, guiding my hand with a sharp nod of his chin. "Down past the alternator." I leaned in. I was so close I could smell him. It wasn't just the Old Spice now. It was the sharp, metallic tang of fresh motor oil, the damp wool of his work socks, and the heavy, musky scent of a man who's been working hard all day. The heat radiating off the engine was stifling, a wall of rising warmth. But the heat radiating off him? That was worse. It was magnetic. It pulled at me, dragging me into his orbit. My hands started to shake. Just a tremor at first, a subtle vibration in my wrist. But as I tried to hold the beam steady on the black rubber of the belt, the light began to dance nervously across the hoses. I gripped the handle tighter, my knuckles turning white, trying to force my body to behave. But the vibration traveled up my arm. I was terrified he would notice. Terrified he would look at my trembling hand and see the pathetic truth of it. The way his bicep brushed my shoulder. The desperate need to be part of his world, even if just to hold a light. He stopped turning the wrench. The metallic ratcheting sound ceased abruptly. Only the drumming of the rain remained, filling the space between us. He didn't pull away. He just turned his head. Slowly. Until his face was inches from mine. In the harsh, unforgiving glare of the work light, I saw the pores of his skin, the dark stubble on his jaw, the smudge of grease near his temple. His eyes locked onto mine. Dark. Unreadable. The air left my lungs in a rush. The moment stretched. Taut. Dangerous. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, his gaze dropping to my mouth for a fraction of a second before snapping back to my eyes. For a heartbeat, I thought he was going to lean in. I thought he was going to bridge that tiny, terrifying gap and wreck me completely. The silence was so loud it roared in my ears. Then, he blinked. He turned back to the engine. He gave the wrench one final, decisive twist. He straightened up, wiping his forehead with the back of his wrist. "That's got it," he said. His voice was tight, strained. But he didn't move away. He stayed in my personal space for a second too long, letting the heat linger between us. Then he wiped his hands on his thighs and walked toward the tool chest without looking back. I stood there, shaking, the flashlight still beaming uselessly into the dark engine. I knew I was playing with fire. But I couldn't stop. I should have stopped there. A rational man, a man who valued his dignity or his bank account, would have taken the hint. He would have taken the fixed car and never returned. But I am not a rational man when it comes to this, so I am an addict, and he was the needle. I went back 4 days later. There was nothing wrong with the car. I hadn't even tried to sabotage it this time. I had run out of components I felt confident I could break without stranding myself on the freeway. So I invented a phantom. I drove in at 5:30 p.m., right as the sun was setting. I claimed there was a strange clicking noise when I turned left. It was a lie so thin it was practically transparent. I pulled into the bay, killed the engine, and got out. Davis was there, leaning against the hydraulic lift, arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't holding a wrench. He wasn't looking at the car. He was looking at me. "Clicking noise," he repeated. His tone was flat, devoid of his usual professional warmth. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded high, brittle in the quiet shop. "Only when I turned left. I thought maybe the CV joint." I trailed off. He wasn't moving toward the hood. He didn't reach for the OBD scanner. He didn't ask me to pop the latch. He just pushed himself off the lift and walked toward me. A slow, predatory stalk that made my heart hammer a frantic, erratic rhythm against my ribs. He stopped a foot away. The space between us was charged, electric with everything we hadn't said for weeks. He looked down at me, his expression unreadable. He was dissecting me with that same calm focus he used to diagnose a blown gasket. "You know," he said softly, his voice a low rumble. "I checked the service history. My stomach dropped through the floor." "Oh?" Yeah. Alternator, there's a battery, fuses, gutter belts, headlight assembly. He took a step closer, invading my space. Car's got 30,000 miles on it. Well, German engineering. Shouldn't be falling apart like this. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't swallow. I had been caught. The shame was hot and instant, flooding my face like a sunburn. I opened my mouth to stammer out an excuse. To blame bad luck. Lemons. Entropy. But the words died in my throat under the weight of his stare. He reached out. I flinched, instinctively bracing for anger. But his hand wasn't angry. It was heavy. Warm. He brought his thumb up to my face, resting it on my cheekbone. The skin of his thumb was rough, calloused like sandpaper, but his touch was devastatingly gentle. He swiped his thumb across my cheek. Slow. Deliberate. Possessive. When he pulled back, there was a dark smudge of grease on my skin. He looked at the mark he'd left on me, and his eyes darkened, the pupils blowing wide. "Engine runs hot," he murmured. His voice dropped an octave, vibrating in my chest. "You gotta handle it careful, or you'll get burned." The realization hit me like a physical blow. He knew. He had known for weeks. Every loosened bolt. Every pulled fuse. He had watched me destroy my own property just to stand in his garage. And he had let me do it. He had watched me watch him. "Davis," I whispered, the name feeling illicit on my tongue. He didn't say anything else. He just walked over to the counter, scribbled something on a pad, and tore off the sheet. He walked back and pressed the paper into my hand. His fingers lingered over mine. Rough against smooth. Grease against skin. "Get out of here," he said. But there was a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. A knowing, dangerous smile. Before I find something else to fix. I looked down at the invoice. Total sums $0 and 0 cents. And below the zeros, in jagged, scrawled handwriting, set for the test drive, followed by a phone number. I walked out to my car, my legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. The heavy metal rattle of the garage door closing behind me sounded like a seal breaking. I got into the driver's seat and adjusted the rearview mirror. I didn't check my teeth. I didn't check my hair. I just stared at the black smudge of grease on my cheek, stark against the pale skin. And I didn't wipe it off. I started the engine. It purred perfectly. I put the car in drive. Let me know down below. Have you ever broken something just to see who would help you fix it?